Hi, I'm Ann. Welcome to or welcome back to my channel. Today I'm wrapping up all the books that I read in December of 2022. Now there is still one day left of December, so there is a chance I might finish another book, but I'm pretty sure I'm not going to unless I pick up like a random new book, because currently I am reading The Clan of the Cave Bear, which I'm only like 100 and some pages in, and it's like 400 some pages. And then I also just started Wrath, which is the last book of the Faithful and the Fallen series. Can I help you? You've been very loud. So I read a total of 10 books this month, 8 of which are on my massive TBR, and it's not as much as I wanted to read, but I feel like, just reading this amount, I think it was last month, it was 6 books. This month it is 8 books for my physical TBR. Even reading that much is a lot more than I have been reading in previous years. So even though it's not as much as I wish it would be, it's still a lot, and I shouldn't be too hard on myself. In fact, I think it brings down my total of books on my physical TBR to 122 books to read for next year. So I at least am doing something. I'm excited to lower the number a lot. So let's just start from the beginning of the month and go through everything. So the first book that I finished this month was The Last Unicorn by Peter S. Beagle. This is a fantasy story following this unicorn who lives alone in her forest and decides she wants to find out what happened to the other unicorns, and because she thinks that she is the last. And so it follows her adventures to find these unicorns, and on the way she meets this unique array of characters, including this magician who can't really do magic well, and this young woman who just adores unicorns and always wanted to meet a unicorn. It's a very interesting book, and on the surface it is very much a classic, basic fantasy. But if you look deeper down, it is very much more than that. It is a commentary on fantasy of that time. The separation between the real world, in a sense, and the fanciful world. For example, when humans see the unicorn, all they see is a stallion. They don't see the unicorn. Even though I would say this is for children, it's middle grade type reading level. It is quite dark for a light fantasy. So it's a great book, and I'm so happy to hear that Beagle was able to get his rights to this book back. I believe there was a whole debate over the last 20 to 30 years that he had no rights to this book, so I think either the publisher or whatever company purchased the rights from him basically took everything away from him, and he's been fighting in court to get back the rights to be able to publish more books in this series, etc. And he finally did, and I don't know all the details about it. I would have to do research, but I'm so excited for him because this was a beautiful book. I ended up giving this, I think, 5 out of 5 stars. The second book I read from my physical TBR was The Total Money Makeover by Dave Ramsey. This book was not applicable to me. I ended up giving it 2 out of 5 stars. It is very much geared toward people who are heavily in debt, whether it is credit card debt, whether it is student debt, different kinds of debt, and how to work your way out of that. I am not in debt, and my husband and I are relatively good at budgeting. We may not be the best. We may spend too much fun money here or there, but we are not the type of people who are drowning in credit card debt. We pay off our credit card at the end of each month. So this book was not geared towards me. I didn't find it very useful. I ended up skimming the second half because I was just so bored with it. But I know there are a lot of people out there that even those that I personally know that could benefit by this book, that have a difficult time budgeting and saying, okay, I need to pay this much off each month of my debt in order to work my way out of debt and to have that be my goal. And a lot of people just get deeper and deeper in debt and spend more and more of their credit card without actually paying it off. So I know a lot of people could benefit by this book, but it wasn't for me personally. The third book that I finished this month was Ripper by Stephen Petruccia. I have a full detailed review on my channel, which I will link down in the description if you're curious to know my full thoughts about it. I enjoyed this book, but the ending especially was very disappointing to me. So I think I ended up giving it, 2 out of 5 stars again. It was okay. I don't see myself ever wanting to reread it again. It had potential. It was interesting because it is about the son of Jack the Ripper and is set about like 10 years or so after the Ripper killings, and it's set in New York City, and it's all about this like young boy who is an orphan who gets caught up in the Jack the Ripper case, or these murders that might be by Jack the Ripper in New York City. So it had an interesting premise, but I just thought it failed on so many levels. But I have full thoughts on my book review for it. The next book I finished was Rune, which is the third book of the Faithful and the Fallen series by John Gwynne. This is the second to last book in the series, and this was the first book I was rather disappointed by. The first like 3/4 of the book is very slow. I didn't feel like we progressed in anything. The last fourth was amazing. It was the same fast-paced, but also like character-driven fantasy narration that I've learned to love from John Gwynne's writing, but the first like 3/4 of the book I was not here for. I was so bored. I kept putting it down and struggling to pick it up. And yeah, I did give this 4 out of 5 stars. So it wasn't like I hated it. I still loved the ending, and I still thought the book was well written. I just found most of the book just rather boring. So it's definitely the weakest book in the entire series, but I'm currently reading the last book in the series, so we'll see how that goes. The next book I read this month was The Afternoon Teabook by Michael Smith. So this book has, I would say, the first fourth of the book talks about the history of British tea, how it came to America, where it originated in both India and China, and how like the rise of the tea trade and how it turned into like this afternoon type tea, as well as the types of cakes and pastries and things like that would be served with the tea itself. And then I enjoyed that section, I would say. But then the rest of the book was very basic recipes for tea sides. So whether it's sandwiches, things like that. And I found that to be, I've read better tea recipe books, so I was kind of just like meh at that section. So I ended up giving this 3 out of 5 stars. It was a good book, especially in the beginning. I learned a lot about like the origin of tea, but the rest of the book was just like meh. I didn't care for the recipes that much, and I don't see myself using any of the recipes. The next book I read was John Adams and the American Revolution by Catherine Drinker Bowen. This woman writes the most entertaining, like dry narratives I've ever seen. So a lot of like historical nonfiction very much tends to be dry and slow moving. And this one was not that at all. The way that Bowen was able to pull out from the letters of John Adams, from primary sources, but turn it into like an interesting narrative was incredible. Now, I know quite a bit about John Adams, especially during his more public career. He's one of my favorite like founding fathers, if you can call them that. I know it's controversial to talk about the founding fathers anymore, but he's one of my favorites because he's just hilarious, and I love seeing his very healthy relationship with his wife, Abigail Adams. So I went to this book excited to learn more about his early life, and this book definitely delivered. I would say the first half of the book follows his life up through college, and then the other half of the book is his public career up to 1776. This book does not deal with his later presidency or anything after that. It just deals with his, in a sense, early history. I do have another nonfiction book that I need to read about him which will deal with his entire life. So this was a good one to start with. I really adored how this was written. I ended up giving it 4 out of 5 stars. Just how interesting it was, how I felt like I was really there in the village he came from, and how I could understand his process of like changing his mind, and because he didn't start off as like a patriot, this freedom fighter. He was very much just like an average guy who was just trying to figure out his way in life, and he was really interested in like learning and knowledge, but he was also very stubborn and rebellious. So it was interesting to see him from his like beginnings all the way up to his more public career. So I enjoyed this book. It was a good book. The next book that I finished was Tales of the Greek Heroes by Roger Lancelyn Green. This is probably a controversial opinion. I did end up giving this 3 out of 5 stars. So I did enjoy it. I just found a lot of the stories to be ones that I had heard of, but also ones that weren't fully told. So this felt very much like an abridged version of a lot of the stories that I had heard about, like Hercules. And I think it's because like this author, I believe, wrote like a century ago, and he was writing more entertaining tales, and for the first time bringing these tales to a more like English audience. So I can understand where he was coming from, but because this is now like a century later, a lot of those stories are mainstream, and so I wanted to know more details. All the stories I read, I was like, I want to know more details about this story or that story. So it was a good book. I ended up giving it 3 out of 5 stars, but I wanted a little bit more development and more context in like all the stories, but still very fun. And if you enjoy like Greek myths and things like that, I think you'll like it. All right, the next book I actually finished just last night, and it was for the 12 Days of Christmas and Coziness that's going on right now, and that is the original Fannie Farmer cookbook. So this is a facsimile of the actual 1896 cookbook, which means it is printed as if it were from that era. So yeah, so you see the actual writing on it that looks exactly how it would have in the original copy. So this is meant to look exactly like the original copy. And I will say, but from like a practical standpoint, it's a boring book to read for fun, but I did love it because it gives all these like little details of like how socially and how we understood macronutrients and things like that, and how people looked at having a balanced diet and how people put together meals. So it's much more like from a historical perspective, if you want to learn about like how people would cook over 100 years ago, 100, like almost 30 years ago now, it's much better than that, as opposed to really getting cozy and looking through a cookbook to like get ideas of things that you would actually cook. So if you look at it that way, it's a great book. And I ended up giving this 5 out of 5 stars just for the historical context. I thought it was really cool for how much I learned. And I do need to like reread this if I ever write a book that's set around that era, because it gives so many details of like how to cook and things like that. However, the one I also read last night that really hit that amazing nerve, but it's not from my physical TBR. My father-in-law gave it to me for Christmas, and it's Half Baked Harvest Every Day. And I don't know how much I will actually make these recipes because it does have some random rare ingredients. I say that, and then it has like fennel seeds. That's a good example of, or like fig preserves. So there's certain things, ingredients that are harder to get than others, but I was just in the cozy mood to like look through a pretty cookbook with pictures, and this really hit the spot. So I ended up, I gave it a 5 out of 5 stars. It was a fun book. It was exactly what I needed at the time. I will be trying like practically to actually cook these meals, but because there were some of these that I'm like, this would be a practical like book to practical recipe to make, and so quite a few of these I want to try, but then some of these I might have to like change the ingredients just a little bit because I'm not getting like really fancy ingredients. And of course, the final book that I finished this month was Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell by Susanna Clarke. I did a full review of this yesterday, so I'll link that in the description as well if you're curious to hear my full thoughts about it. I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. I don't think this book is for everyone, but those who like both like fantasy as well as like Victorian literature, Charles Dickens, I think this would be right up your alley, and I think you would enjoy this. It's definitely a very unique read, a very unique fantasy, and it's very hard to like put in like a general genre because it is quite unique, but I enjoyed it. And you know, as much as I realized that, yes, I only read 10 books this month, quite a few of the books were very long. For example, Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell was about 900 pages. 840 pages. Then John Adams and the American Revolution was about 670 pages. And of course, Rune was about 750 pages. So just between those 3 books, you know, you're looking at probably like 2 to 3 books, two to three average length books in one of these. So I don't feel that bad that I didn't read as much as I wanted to. There were a lot of books I wanted to get to. Cloak and Dagger Christmas, I was rather disappointed with myself on because I didn't read half the books that I wanted to. A lot of the like mysteries I had in my physical TBR, I'm going to just have to move to another month. But that's okay. I'm happy with how many books I got off my physical TBR at least, because that is 8 less than I will have to worry about next year. So have you read any of these books? Let me know your thoughts down in the comments. Thank you so much for watching. If you like this video, like, subscribe, and I will see you all in the next video. Bye!